Alright guys, and welcome back to another video on the channel. I hope you're all doing well and staying safe indoors. Today we're going to be having a look at every Premier League club's most underrated player in my opinion. Now of course you may have seen other videos like this. It is not an original idea, other people have done it, I'll say that now. But I'm giving my take on it obviously as a neutral. I only support one Premier League club of course, so the 19 others I'm very much a neutral, so I'm sure it'll be very interesting to see what I think as a neutral as to who's the most underrated player at each club. And so yeah, let's get into it. But before we start, please make sure you are subscribed. If your subscribe button is red at the moment, make it white by clicking on it. It's free, it doesn't cost a thing, and it takes a second. It really helps me out. I want to get to, I guess, 100 subscribers. It's obviously nothing really, but it's the first little milestone I guess with this new channel, so the sooner the better. So subscribe, have your notifications turned on, and let's get into the video. Now like my previous video with the Premier League clubs, we're doing this alphabetically starting with Arsenal. Now I have put Gabriel Martinelli. Bukayo Saka was in with a shout, but I think the fact that Martinelli has scored more goals than Saka probably gives him the edge. Now he was signed in the summer from Brazil, no one had heard of him, so touted as this wonder kid, but again we didn't know who he was. He's actually looked a very promising prospect for the Gunners. 10 goals and 4 assists in 26 appearances, albeit most of them in the League Cup and the Europa League. He's hit the ground running essentially, still 18 years of age as a winger. He's looked tricky, he's looked skillful, he's looked pacey. He looks like he's got a lot of talent and a lot of potential. Hasn't really been talked about much given the fact that most of the talk around Arsenal has been about how they've underachieved, but yeah, very much a promising player for Arsenal. Next up is Aston Villa. Now, maybe not underrated, let me know in the comment section below if you're a Villa fan what you think about this one, but I put John McGinn. Now, for me, one of Villa's better players. Very unfortunate to get an ankle injury midway through the season in December, which has really screwed Villa over to be fair. Obviously, when we talk Villa, the go-to player is Jack Grealish, but this guy pulls the strings in midfield and is a massive part of that team. You know, he was huge for them in the Championship last season. He's proved to adapt to the Premier League quite well, scored 3 goals, and he's crucial for that side. A real blow for them to lose him. Next up is Bournemouth, and I've gone for Philip Billing. A little bit like McGinn, pulls the strings in midfield and doesn't really get the credit he deserves. Now, it has been a difficult season for Bournemouth, of course. They're still in the relegation zone as it stands. But at just 23, he proves to be a decent enough prospect. He was given his chance again in the Premier League after getting relegated last season with Huddersfield, and he seems like a decent enough player to control the play for Bournemouth, you know, make the difference, be that sort of massive presence in the midfield. He's chipped in with a goal and assist as well. And of course with Bournemouth you sort of talk about their attack, you know, your Callum Wilsons, your Josh Kings, etc. But actually Billing has been quite a big presence for them. On to Brighton. Now again with McGinn, this one might be a little bit obvious, but for me I don't think he gets enough credit anyway. That's Neil Maupay. Now Maupay was signed from Brentford in the summer. He's a striker and he's done pretty well. You know, he's adapted to the Premier League. Now Brighton have had a pretty quiet season and they're currently sat in 15th, but the Frenchman has scored 8 goals in the Premier League this season, which is actually a quarter of Brighton's Premier League goals as a whole team. So it seems to be he's been Brighton's most influential, best player this season. But I don't hear a lot of talk about Brighton, and so I don't really hear a lot of talk about Maupay. And actually he's one of the more underrated strikers in the league. Only 23, could be a very decent player in the coming seasons. Next up we have Burnley, another striker, and that is Chris Wood. Now Maupay scored 25% of Brighton's goals in the Premier League this season. Chris Wood has scored 1/3 of Burnley's. 11 goals in 26 league appearances. The striker again has been massively underrated. And Burnley as a whole team has been underrated in my opinion. I said it in my last video, the fact that they've gone up into 10th has sort of gone under the radar a little bit, and his goals have been a massive contributor to that. And for a team that doesn't score many, scoring 11 in under 30 appearances, I think is actually a really good tally. Next up is Crystal Palace, and I've gone for Jordan Ayew. I know there seems to be a theme and a little bit of a trend starting with these, and it's strikers that aren't getting the credit. But again, I think Ayew has been one of those strikers that have had a very good season. Many people have talked about it. He made his loan move permanent in the summer, and before that hadn't really set the league alight. I think with Swansea and with Aston Villa before that, no one really thought of him as one of the strikers in the league with decent potential. He's 28 now, and I think it's fair to say he's had his best Premier League season ever. 8 goals in 28 league appearances, that's helped push Palace up into 11th, just shy of the top half, and he scored one of the goals of the season with a sensational solo goal against West Ham. He's been a massive player for them and has been one of the key contributors as to why they've stayed up this season, or why they will stay up. Next up is Chelsea, and I've gone for Mateo Kovacic. Now, with Chelsea this season, everyone's been talking about the youngsters, the fact that Frank Lampard's come in. but no one's really been speaking much about Mateo Kovacic and how good he's been in the midfield. He's pulls the strings, he controls that midfield in the centre of the park. He essentially controls the way the Chelsea play. Arguably, he might have had a bit of a underwhelming first season on loan from Real Madrid last campaign. Chelsea fans, let me know what you thought of his first season. But since he made his move permanent in the summer, where Chelsea somehow defied the fact that they had a transfer ban, he's been incredibly impressive. Now, numbers wise, he's only contributed a goal and 3 assists in the league. But like I said, he pulls the strings, he's instrumental in that midfield, and is a big reason as to why Chelsea create so many chances and have scored quite a few goals this season. Next up is Everton, and I have gone for Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Again, another striker I know, but he has been massively underrated in my opinion. And this season we've seen him really come on leaps and bounds, still very young at 23, but he scored 13 goals in the Premier League this season, one of the top goal scorers in the league, has led him being touted for an England call-up. With 13 goals, he's amongst the top strikers in the league, but hasn't really been spoken about enough in my opinion, and the fact that he's still very young, got a lot of potential, could be a very bright prospect for England. Next up is Leicester, and I've gone for Johnny Evans. Now, Leicester have gone and scored loads and loads of goals, that's pushed them all the way up into third. They've had an excellent season, but not many people have spoken about their defence and the fact that actually they're the third best defensive side in the entire league, having conceded just 28 goals in the Premier League this season. Now, in the summer they sold Harry Maguire for around £80 million. Everyone thought that there might be a hole left by him, but actually, even Soyuncu, the other centre-back who's had a great season, has stepped up to the plate. But Johnny Evans has been massively underrated, the best centre-back out of the two, definitely, and one of the key reasons as to why they've conceded so few goals. Not many people talk about him. They talk about the Vardys, the James Maddisons, the Tielemans, the star players for Leicester, but no one is talking about Johnny Evans. With 8 clean sheets and a goal to his name as well, he has had a sensational season in the Premier League. Next up is Liverpool, and I think it's fair to say a lot of their players have been given a lot of credit this season. You talk about the Manes, the Firminos, the Van Dijks, the Salahs, but for me, I think Fabinho is their most underrated player this season. Of course, they've had a sensational campaign in the league. They're going to win the title by a good amount of points if obviously they're given it and the season's continued. But Fabinho, a bit like McGinn, a bit like Billing, obviously at a much better standard. He's the one that's been pulling the strings in the midfield, the difference between attack and defence. He's protected his back four well, meaning that Liverpool are actually the best defensive side in the league. We talk about Van Dijk being such a good defender. Fabinho is also protecting the back four and cutting out the chances of the opposition. And as well as that, he's chipped in with 1 goal in Liverpool's biggest league game of the season, and a stunner against Man City. No one really saw that coming, but yeah, I think he's had a great season and not many people have spoken about him, or not enough anyway. Next on to Manchester City. For me, I think Riyad Mahrez is their most underrated player this season. Hasn't been given enough plaudits, I think, in the entire time that he's been at City. I think it's almost 2 years now. Now, he's a sensational winger. We saw that at Leicester, but with City, they've got very many sensational players, especially on the wings. And we also know that Guardiola likes to rotate a lot. So given the fact that he's not started too many games this season for City, I think 7 goals in the league is actually quite an impressive tally. And going on to their City rivals, Manchester United, this one might be a little bit controversial. If you're a Man United fan, let me know what you think about this one. I've gone for Fred. Now, he started the season woefully. I think even last season when he signed, he wasn't great. But recently, he's pulled it out of the bag. He's looked like a really complete midfielder. He's contributed with a couple goals, especially in the Europa League. That's where his performances have been best. But he's proved to be, a really big presence in that United midfield. I don't really know how he's turned it around because he looked woeful at the start of the season. But yeah, Fred really hasn't been spoken about enough, especially in a season where all the talk's been about Pogba. And Pogba's not even been in the side. Next up is Newcastle, and I've gone for Federico Fernandez. Now, Newcastle don't score many, so it's a good thing that they don't concede too many either, otherwise they would be in deep trouble. Now, alongside Kieran Clark, who's also in with a shout for this one, I've gone with Federico Fernandez. Now, another centre-back in this list, and for me, the key reason as to why Newcastle haven't conceded that many goals. He's picked up 6 clean sheets in 23 league appearances, contributed with 2 goals as well. Been a decent enough presence at the back for Newcastle. Next up is Norwich, and I've gone for Emi Buendia, another one that potentially isn't underrated. You do hear him spoken about a little bit, but for me, I don't think he's been given enough credit. Given the fact that Norwich are bottom of the league, he's actually one of the top players in the entire league for chances created. Now, he hasn't scored a goal in the league, that's a shame, but he's picked up 7 assists and it's proved to be a little tricky forward. Also at 23 years of age, he's got a lot of potential, and it seemed quite likely that when Norwich do go down, and let's be honest, they are going down if the season's continued, you know, I think another Premier League club will come and snap him up, and there is a lot of potential there. Next up is Sheffield United, and if you've seen my previous video, you'll know how much I rate Sheffield United, or I have done this season anyway. So I've gone for John Egan. Now, they're one of the better defensive sides in the league, conceded the second fewest amount of goals in the entire league, and I think John Egan has been their best defender and a key contributor as to why they've been so solid at the back. You know, Sheffield United have received lots of plaudits this season. You know, Leeds Mousset has gotten a decent amount of credit in my opinion. McBurney, John Fleck as well. I think he was possibly with a shout for underrated player for Sheffield United, but no one talks about Egan. No one really talks about the backline in general, to be honest, which is crazy because they've been so solid. But yeah, Egan's proved that he's very comfortable on the ball. 9 clean sheets this season, and he's only missed 1 game in the league for Sheffield United all season, and that was a 3-3 draw where they lost a 2-0 lead. Next up is my team, Southampton, so it's pretty easy for me to pick this one out, and I asked on Twitter, you know, what people were saying. Everyone said the same person as I expected, Stuart Armstrong. This guy is criminally underrated as a centre attacking midfielder, possibly underrated by our own manager. You know, he didn't even get an opportunity, or a good enough opportunity anyways, until around Christmas time anyway, just sort of mid-December I think was about when he came into the side in the league, and he's proved to be one of the key contributors as to why our form has upturned massively. The 28-year-old has scored 3 Premier League goals, and they've all come since the turn of the year, so he's in good form. He's just instrumental, and he's so creative in the middle of the park. We picked him up for £7 million, absolute bargain. More people need to be talking about Stuart Armstrong because he is a cracking player. Next up is Tottenham, and I've gone with Giovanni Lo Celso. Now, in a season where not many players have really done well for Spurs, it's more about an overrated player for them. I think Lo Celso's quietly gone under the radar, new signing. No one really talked about the fact that he was on loan, and they made his move permanent in January because he'd impressed so much. And he looks like a really good replacement for Christian Eriksen, who was always going to leave. He left in January for Inter, and as that sort of creative midfielder, attacking midfielder, forward player, I think Lo Celso could be a really good pickup for them. He's shown that he's comfortable on the ball, he's shown that he can play a forward pass, and that he knows how to play the ball forwards and create chances. He hasn't scored in the Premier League yet, a few goals in the Cups, but still a young player, and I think we can expect to see a lot from Giovanni Lo Celso next season, the seasons after that. Then going on to Watford, and I've gone for Etienne Capoue. Now, when we talk about Watford, I think as outsiders, I think a lot of people talk about Doucouré as their best player because he's the one that's always been linked with the £50 million move to Tottenham. Capoue's actually the better midfielder. He controls the play, he's a big presence in terms of the transition between attack and defence. He protects his back line, and he tries and gets the ball forward when he can, it seems anyway. Obviously, Watford fans, let me know if I'm wrong. Now, it has been a difficult season for Watford, 3 managers, but it seems under Nigel Pearson he's found his form again, and in his early 30s is an experienced head in the middle that Watford really need, especially when they're in the relegation battle that they're in. Next up is West Ham. A little bit like Spurs, a lot of their players have underachieved this season. I think Pablo Fornals is one of their more underrated players, and someone that really I think deserved more of a chance. Big money move from Villarreal in the summer, a lot of hype around him as a young, promising Spanish midfielder. Hasn't really been given the opportunity, or wasn't at least under Pellegrini. He's contributed 3 goals and 5 assists in mainly appearances off the bench in all competitions, and at 24 years of age has a lot of potential. Now, I think there are other players I could have spoken about for West Ham, but they've just been so under par, like I said in the previous video. You know, I think they've been so under par this season, and yeah, I think Fornals could definitely be within a shout of being more of a regular starter for West Ham next season. Now finally we go on to Wolves. Now Conor Cody was one of these players that I was thinking about giving the most underrated player for, but I've gone with Matt Doherty. Now I think since Wolves got promoted and I've seen Doherty a lot more, I've realised how good a wing back he actually is, and he's criminally underrated in my opinion. All the talk the last few seasons have been about Wolves' big money signings, you know, your Jotas, your Jimenez's, Bolly, Neves, but no one's actually given any sort of attention to the fact that Doherty's actually been at Wolves for 10 years and has been with them through their rise from League One to the Championship up to the Premier League. For a wing back, he scores a decent amount of goals, 7 in just under 40 appearances this season. You know, helps out with the defence as well. I think he's criminally underrated, and when we talk about fullbacks, wing backs, etc., Doherty's never in the discussion, and he really deserves to be in my opinion. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Let me know in the comment section below what you thought about my suggestions. Was I wrong? Was I right? If you're a fan of these clubs, let me know who your most underrated player of the season is this season. Remember to leave the video a like if you have enjoyed it, subscribe if you're new, follow me on my socials, and I'll see you for another video very soon.